Thank you for staying quiet. This is okay. The next candidates on the stage are both running for the 37th district for the state of Washington, and that's what includes this area that we're in right now. The first candidate is Louis Watanabe. I'm sorry, Watanabe.
Watanabe.
I'm so sorry, Watanabe. And the second candidate is Parmila Jayapal. First question is, will you support a statewide increase of the minimum wage to $15 an hour?
Well, actually, I have doorbelled for CTAC Prop 1, and so I have a record of being supportive of the minimum wage. So the other thing is that it's, in and of itself, it's not enough, because what we see is the reason why we're talking about it is because we lack jobs, high-paying jobs, and that's what we really need.
Absolutely. First of all, hi everyone. It's great to see so many friends. I worked on the $15 minimum wage committee here in Seattle. Incredibly excited that we got that through. 100,000 workers across the city of Seattle that are going to be lifted up out of poverty to $15, and that's going to put $2.9 billion into the pockets of low-wage workers over the next 10 years. So yes, I support this. Last year, the bill in the state was for a $12 minimum wage. I think given the passage of 15 in CTAC and Seattle, we should really look at what is the maximum we can get to and be able to pass it across the state, because with the environment changing, I think we have a real opportunity to make a case that maybe it's not $12. What is the right number, right? Maybe it's 14, maybe it's 15 if we can get there. That all happens because you all continue to organize. You know I'm a community organizer. I believe the power is with the people to create that kind of change, and I intend to organize within the legislature should I be able to get there. Thank you.
I just want to follow up. Could you both clearly answer, especially Mr. Watanabe, whether you support a $15 minimum wage increase for the state?
I have believed that I am support of it, yes.
Thank you.
How do you propose to fund education given the McCleary decision? How will you ensure that those additional resources are equitably targeted and distributed to low-income schools?
So McCleary gives us both an opportunity and a mandate, right? It says that the legislature has to fully fund education because we are 41st in the country for the funding of public education. The question to me is, you can't, it's not just about funding K-12 education. You can't do that and cut everything else. You can't cut early learning, you can't cut higher ed, and you also can't cut all the support services. So to me, it's about how do we raise the revenue that we need at the state. I wrote an op-ed for The Stranger, which you can read online, that is about how we need to fundamentally change our broken tax system in the country. Because 60% of all of our revenue comes from sales and excise taxes. It means that the lowest earning people actually pay the most, and that is just upside down. So not only don't we have enough money, but we also need to make sure that the people that are paying those dollars are the ones who have the most amount of money. So I say we need to reform the tax system, and if we don't use this opportunity that we have with McCleary to do that, then we're missing the boat. In terms of directing the dollars at low-income students and communities of color, we just have to make that happen. And frankly, if I get elected, I would be the only woman of color in the state senate, or possibly one of two if we can get Sherry Song in there. We need more people who are activists representing communities of color in the legislature, and I hope to be able to do that.
Please hold your applause to the end of every, when each candidate answers both the questions. Right? So please hold your applause.
So as an educator, I have seen many students from different school districts come to my college, Bellevue College, and quite frankly, I'm very worried about their future, because they're what we provide today is not adequate for the 21st century. And so first of all, what we don't do well is that we don't actually value every student and give them the things that they need. For example, hands-on skills. You know, we have said, oh, everybody should be on the computer, but we think that, auto shop and other skills training is too expensive, but that doesn't value every child. And so that's one of the first things that I think that McCleary offers us as an opportunity to correct a lot of problems that we have in our educational system. But taxes are certainly important, and I support a comprehensive tax reform that includes basically switching from a business and occupation tax from gross income to net.
Will you support the passage of the Family Unity Act, formerly known as the Trust Act, to stop the practice of local law enforcement detaining people without documents?
Yes, yes, yes. I worked on the detainer ordinance at the state, 364 days instead of 365 days. We got that passed. We worked on the first Don't Ask immigration ordinance here when I was at Hate Free Zone working with Casa Latina and NERP and so many others. We worked on the King County detainer ordinance. So this is my history, is working on that particular issue of immigration enforcement at the state level. And you know, with the lack of passage of comprehensive immigration reform at the federal level, which, let me tell you, we are not done. Si se puede. Yes, we can get it done, but we have to keep working. But it means that the state has all of the authority for immigration enforcement is starting to be seen more and more at the state level, and it's really up to us to find ways that we can pull back that curtain that, you know, used to be that there was a big division between the enforcement of federal immigration law and local cops. And when George Bush came into office, actually, he started to pull that all apart and combine those, and that is what has allowed for programs like Secure Communities and so many other things that allow immigrants to be detained and deported for minor misdemeanors and without due process.
Family has been central to our communities, and so of course I do support keeping families together. And I like to say that in my family's experience, so, you know, immigration has changed over the years. My grandparents, when they came from Japan, couldn't become citizens under the law years ago. But they still came here, and actually my father's family ran a farm along the Green River and sold vegetables at Pike Place Market. But, you know, during the war, World War II, my parents, who were born here as American citizens, were put behind barbed wire along with my grandparents. And I want to say that I have sympathy for immigrant communities because of what my family has gone through. So thank you very much.
Thank you. What do you think are the most pressing issues for immigrants and refugees and people of color? And what do you plan to do to address those issues?
Well, I think that the central issue is about jobs and investment in our community. You know, basically, you know, most people who have jobs actually travel outside of this district for their jobs, which actually speaks to the lack of jobs and investment in this community. And quite frankly, what every community wants is self-reliance, and that's why I'm supporting small business, because that's businesses that are locally based, that are our businesses, and everything that I can do to make them better means that we are able to achieve what we need. And as a business professor and small business counselor, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to help people realize their dreams, and as state senator, that's exactly what I intend to do for this district. So those are the kinds of things that are very important for our community. And you know, I think the other thing that's really important about this community is about being able to live our lives the way we want to. That's why I'm really glad that Senator Hasegawa actually had a bill that allowed for basically people of faith to be able to choose to take a time off on their holiday. And that was a really great celebration that we had at the Rainier Community Center on that bill. These are the kinds of things that, as a state senator, I really believe in, and I really believe that this gives our community an ability to basically do what we wish to do and live our lives with the freedom that this country gives us.
I have spent the last 14 years fighting for the rights of immigrants and refugees and people of color and low-income families. And many of you know that I started Hate-Free Zone right after 9/11, when communities were being targeted and discriminated against because of their religion, because of the color of their skin, because of their backgrounds. And from that small seed, we were able to grow, with so many of you in the room, a stronger voice for immigrant and refugee communities and communities of color, and became what was then Hate-Free Zone became One America, became one of the larger immigrant advocacy organizations in the state, and working in partnership to build a coalition, because the issues, you asked about what the most critical issues are, really you can take any issue that we're facing, from education to transit and transportation, to criminal incarceration and the school-to-prison pipeline. And in every single issue, you see institutionalized racism, racial inequity, and communities of color losing out. So it's difficult to prioritize one issue. But across the board, we need watchdogs, proactive organizers inside and outside the legislature to say, whatever the issue is that we're dealing with, whether it's public health, whether it's education, whether it's the jails, we actually need to make sure that we are addressing racial equity within those areas. When the budget cuts happen, often those cuts fall directly on people of color. And so I have gone to Olympia over and over again over that last 14 years with APIC, with different organizations, and I've been endorsed by Diane Narasaki, by Hillary Stern, by Toshiko, by every single labor union, because we need to build a coalition to correct this inequity.
If elected, will you commit to meet with the coalition within 60 days? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, there will never be a business as usual with me as state senator.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for staying quiet. We are going to continue to move on. We have candidates on stage and one other race after this one, and then we're done. On stage we have candidates running for the 43rd District for the state of Washington, State of Representatives, position number 2. They're running against one another, and it's Frank Chop and Jessica Spear. The first question is, will you support a statewide increase in the minimum wage to $15 an hour?
Absolutely. In fact, I was a member of the coalition in 1998 to actually increase the state minimum wage here to the highest in the nation, and also the first in the nation to tie it to the cost of living. I also strongly supported the $15 an hour wage increase at CTEC, also in the city of Seattle. We're working with Justin Farrell and many others, including a whole coalition of folks, through a prosperity agenda to make sure that we raise the minimum wage at the state level as well. Our proposal will go to $12 phased in over 3 years. We need your help on that, though. This is a very important thing to deal with economic inequality that we need to deal with. Thank you.
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the things that we're campaigning on, is a $15 an hour minimum wage statewide. We won that here in Seattle by electing the first socialist in 100 years, Shema Sawant, who went on to launch the 15 Now grassroots campaign, of which I was the organizing director. I went out into the communities to build community action groups, to get people involved in the process, to build support for the low-wage workers, and to win $15 an hour minimum wage for 100,000 workers. And it's good to hear that my opponent supports a $15 an hour minimum wage. He didn't support it 2 years ago when Shama Sawant first ran against Speaker Chop and put forward a $15 an hour minimum wage. And he did not support the $12 an hour minimum wage that was being put forward by Justin Farrell. So it's not just a matter of supporting it, but what is your experience organizing for it? Are you going to go out there and build community support for it? So I encourage people to think about that when you listen to the answers. It's not whether or not you support something or you think something is good, but are you actually going to go out there and fight for it?
Mr. Chop, since you were referred to directly by your opponent, could you just answer or respond?
Yeah, well, basically that's not true. I was actively involved in the $15 minimum wage issue through CIRCC. As a result of that, I've been endorsed by so many of the labor unions. We've got strong grassroots support as well as the labor organizations that are actually working together to move forward the working people's agenda, including the minimum wage and also paid sick leave, dealing with 4 bills that we passed in the House for wage theft, because that's a huge issue affecting a lot of communities of color.
I think she actually said that 2 years ago when Kshama Sawant first proposed that you were not supportive of the $15 an hour.
I strongly supported the effort started by Service Employees International Union 775. They came up with the original proposal actually back east. So I've been working with them ever since then for the last year and a half, 2 years. They came up with a proposal of $15 minimum wage, and that's what I supported when they asked me to at CIRCC, which was the first effort to do such a thing. I can give you documents if you want.
Thank you.
How do you propose to fund education, given the McCleary decision? How will you ensure that those additional resources are equitably targeted and distributed to low-income schools?
By taxing the super wealthy. We have the most regressive tax system in the entire nation, and we're constantly asked to accept more property taxes, increase in the sales taxes, so that we can fund our social services, like public education, like public transit. And we never have enough money to fund those services, and we're constantly facing cuts to public transit. And now we see that education is criminally underfunded by billions of dollars. So we need to tax the super wealthy that live in the state. There are 68,000 millionaires that live in King County alone. We need to tax them so that we have a stable revenue source to fully fund our education. We also need to end corporate welfare. You know, $6 billion every single year is handed out to corporations that don't need it. If you close those corporate loopholes, then you have the money that's necessary to fully fund education. And the last thing I'll say is we need legislators that are going to stand up to the corporations and not roll over backwards when they tell us, give us a tax break or we're leaving the state. You know, Boeing got the largest tax handout in United States history, $9 billion. They got that last fall, even though the legislature knew they had to come up with a plan to fully fund education. But they put that plan off and now are held in contempt of court because they didn't come up with that plan. Instead, they funded the CEOs of Boeing, they patted their pockets, they got what they wanted, and now 6,000 jobs have been, shipped out of the state since we got that tax handout given to Boeing. So we need people that are going to say what's necessary, and that is to tax the super wealthy to fully fund education.
I'm going to ask for everyone to hold their applause until both candidates have an opportunity to answer.
I strongly support fully funding education. In fact, the House Democrats have put together the plan to do so. A year ago, we passed a $1.3 billion tax increase to fund the first phase, fully fund the first phase of McCleary. Also, the McCleary decision for basic education funding is based on efforts by House Democrats through a couple bills that were passed in previous years, 2261 and 2776. We strongly support more revenue, including taxes on the wealthy. Our plan for $1.3 billion to get the ball rolling actually included closing $500 million of tax loopholes, $300 million in wealthy estates, and another $500 million or so on businesses basically across the state. We think it's a fair package. It was very positive, very progressive, and we got the job done. At the same time, we got to deal with the state Senate, as Bob Hoskauer well knows. That state Senate, dominated by Republicans, only went along with about $300 million of that tax package. We have got to work together to build a coalition to move this forward. In addition, I've been working with an equity and education coalition that I meet with fairly regularly to make sure that the new money that we do provide for schools actually gets to the people who need it through an equitable distribution.
Will you support the passage of the Family Unity Act, formerly known as the Trust Act, to stop the practice of local law enforcement detaining people without documents?
Absolutely. In fact, I urge them to come up with that new name, and that's a very good name to describe it. We're working with a coalition of immigrant groups and advocates for communities of color to move that bill forward. Also, I've been working with Councilmember Larry Gossett, who was the prime proponent of that at the county level of King County, and he was able, through a great deal of effort, to get that passed at the county level. That helps us pass it at the state level, and I really appreciate everybody working together on that. We have a coalition to do that, and we'll move the bill forward.
Absolutely, and I think it's a little funny that you mentioned you urged them to change the name, because when they first came to your office and talked about the Trust Act, all you focused on was the name, and that's why they organized a protest outside your office. The immigrant rights activists that first put this forward. I don't see any reason why we need to change the name. The substance is what matters. It passed as the California Trust Act in California. Why can't it be the Washington Trust Act? So that we can build a movement of trust acts passing all across the country. The name doesn't matter, it's the substance that matters. I also think it's important, again, that it's not just whether or not you support something. Are you going to go out there and build the support in the communities for it and explain to people why this is absolutely necessary? We cannot allow our families to be split apart because the federal government and the Democratic Party establishment at the federal level refuses to stand up to the Republicans and actually pass comprehensive immigration reform. We need to use whatever tools are available to us at the state level, at the local level, to stop the immigration, to deportations, to stop the families from being ripped apart, to stop people being held in detention centers. We need to use whatever tools are available for us, and we can't just say we support it. We need to go out there and campaign on it. Are you willing to do that?
Mr. Chop, I'll give you an opportunity to respond, but also if you could just also refer to this question as well.
Okay.
What do you think are the most pressing issues for immigrants and refugees and communities of color, and what can you commit to do to address those problems?
Well, responding first to what she said, I've been working for years on a coalition effort to pass many pieces of legislation that benefit the communities of color and particularly immigrant communities, including the Voting Rights Act. The House Democrats passed that in the State House 4 or 5 times, it seems. Died in the Republican Senate. We have other efforts as well, which leads to your segue to your effort here, your follow-up question. I strongly believe in providing educational opportunity for everyone, particularly immigrants and new people in this country. My family came into this country in 1905 to get out of the imperialist wars in Europe. As a result, in this year, we were finally able to pass the DREAM Act, which provides undocumented young students the ability to get state financial aid to get an education and improve themselves in their community. As a result, I was, I've also been endorsed by One America Votes, by Stella Ortega, Larry Gossett, Hillary Stern, Diane Narasaki, and many, many others because of my solid work of accomplishment in these arenas. And also another one that I think that is very, very important that will actually transform this society is a thing that we passed several years ago called the College Bound Scholarship. It doesn't matter where you came from or anything about your background. If you sign up for it in middle school, keep those grades up, graduate from high school, you're guaranteed free tuition in the community colleges and the universities. It's extremely important. We've now basically signed up hundreds of thousands of young people to not only get through high school, but then get a college degree to move forward to make equality not only a dream, but an actual reality.
I mean, I'm going to start by saying I really agreed with what Pramila had said earlier about there's almost any issue you can point at and say that this is a central issue facing these communities because of the racial disparity, because the inequity that exists under the system that we're living under. But I would say that centrally, the issues that face them are access to high-quality education, access to public transit, access to social services, and good-paying union jobs. How can we change this if we continue electing people that cut social services, that don't fully fund our education, that don't fully fund our public transit? Speaker Chop cut $10 billion from our social services since the recession. That disproportionately affects communities of color, immigrant communities, and refugee communities. I mean, when it comes to quality education, it's great that the DREAM Act passed, but that DREAM Act was passed because of the work of the activists, because of the dreamers sitting outside of the office of elected officials and going on hunger strikes and creating the political space to even allow that to be passed. That's the type of work that we need. That's the type of representative that I'm looking to be, somebody that's going to be going within the communities and empowering you to create the political space so that we can actually win. And I think that it's really important to point out that it's one thing to say you pass the DREAM Act, you now have the availability of undocumented immigrants to have access to, money for higher education, but there's not enough money there in general already. There are 30,000 students that qualified for it, but there's not the money for them to even get that to go to school. So you need to fully fund that. And again, that comes to standing up to the big corporations, closing the corporate loopholes, and taxing the super wealthy so that we can fully fund our social services and begin tackling all these other issues.
If elected,
Well, since she referred to me, I have to respond again. We vastly expanded health care for all. It's a fundamental human need of providing health care, and it's a fundamental human right. So we expanded Medicaid to 500,000 new adults in this state. We also, through my efforts, led the way to create the Apple Health for All Kids program, which led to 800,000 young people, regardless of their income, regardless of their backgrounds, to get free health care from the state in a single-payer system. That 800,000 includes 40,000 undocumented kids getting free health care. We're leading the nation in terms of health care for everyone, including those who happen to be undocumented. And this is an incredibly important thing. It's a major step forward that we achieved this last 2 years. I'm very, very proud of it.
Can I just respond very quickly, since he just brought up something completely different?
very
I think we have to take a step back and think about the social crisis that's unfolding under his 16-year leadership in the House and 20-year incumbency. We face the highest poverty rates in 50 years. We have the 8th worst affordable housing. We have a budget deficit of $1 billion that they're facing next year. We have criminal underfunding of education. So pointing to this or that thing that's been passed over a 20-year career does not make up for all of those other things. It does not make up for the criminal underfunding of education. It does not make up for the fact that we have a high poverty rate. It does not make up for the most regressive tax system in the entire country. So let's take a step back and look at the real situation that we face here and not get lost among the trees.
If elected, will you commit to meeting with the coalition within 60 days?
Oh, absolutely. I am running to give a voice to your community, to give a voice to all those who are always shut out of the discussions. I mean, that's why Boeing got a $9 billion tax handout in 3 days, but after 4 years, we still don't have a plan to fully fund education. That's because you don't have a voice down in Olympia. You don't have representatives that take no corporate money. I take no corporate money. He's taken over $800,000 from the worst corporations: Bank of America, Wells Fargo, BP Oil, Chevron, Boeing, Microsoft.
Thank you. We were running out of time. I'm sorry. We have to move on.
Was my time up? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's supposed to be yes or no, but thank you.
Well, to briefly answer, I will continue to work with all sorts of coalitions, including this one. In fact, we work together in a coalition across the state to put in tangible money, $1 billion in the State Housing Trust Fund that has built thousands of units of housing for low-income farm workers across the state. And we also work together in a Communities of Color agenda. Guess what? This building, funding for this building was on that agenda, and I got it done. Several $100,000 was spent by the state because of my leadership, plus a few other folks from your coalition to get the job done and fix this building up.
Thank you.